The storyteller was back, and this time the tale would keep even the drowsiest listener on edge. The headlights came out of nowhere, twin beams slicing through the darkness behind like knives. Squinting into the rearview mirror, the grip on the steering wheel tightened. The road had been empty for miles, and now, suddenly, this truck. Past midnight on a relentless cross-country haul, exhaustion clung like a second skin, and the highway blurred into a never-ending ribbon of gray. The plan had been to push through, get home before dawn. But with this truck looming behind, the body jolted back into alertness. Its cab filled the mirror, too close, too fast. The brakes were tapped, a polite cue to back off. No change. If anything, it inched closer. Sliding into the right lane, the hope was that the truck would pass. Instead, it mirrored every move, its grille now so near every rivet could be counted. Heart racing, the accelerator went down. 70. 75. 80. The truck matched every increase, unbothered, unwavering. A cold sweat gathered. Alone, on a stretch of deserted highway, something was clearly wrong. Was it rage? A drunk? Something else entirely? A sign for a rest stop appeared like a lifeline. No second thoughts. The exit was taken, and the truck stayed close behind. The winding road to the lot offered no reassurance, and when the lot came into view, empty except for the flicker of a dying street lamp, it only made the dread worse. Parking near the restrooms, the engine was killed. The truck stopped behind, headlights flooding the mirror with white fire. Eyes shut, chest heaving. Silence. Then nothing. Opening them again, the lot was empty. No truck. No lights. Just darkness and the faint hum above. Frozen in place, trying to understand. Was it fatigue? A hallucination? It had all felt so real. Stepping out, the night air cooled flushed cheeks and jittering limbs. A full lap of the parking lot revealed no sign of what had been chasing moments earlier. The rest of the night was spent in the car, seat reclined, eyes fluttering but never fully shutting. Every rumble in the distance sounded like that truck returning. By dawn, sleep had become impossible. Coffee was now the only hope. Back on the highway, mirrors were watched like a hawk. The road was quiet, oppressively so. Every distant set of headlights sparked anxiety. None matched the truck. An hour later, salvation came in the form of a neon-lit 24-hour diner. Cars in the lot. People. Relief. Inside, the bell above the door rang out. A few glances, then indifference. Settling into a booth by the window, eyes stayed trained on the road outside. A waitress arrived, coffee in hand, noting the haggard appearance of her new customer. She poured a steaming mug. Words stumbled out, bits of a strange night. A truck that followed, then vanished. She paused, recognition flickering in her eyes. Leaning in, her voice dropped. Others had come before with the same story. Always that same stretch of highway. Always at night. Always a truck without a driver. A chill settled over the table. No one had seen who drove it. It always disappeared. Her tone grew grim. Robberies. Disappearances. Cars found abandoned. No trace of drivers. No arrests. No leads. It felt like something torn from a campfire tale. Reports had been made, but nothing stuck. No proof. Just fear and missing people. The sense of isolation lifted slightly. This wasn't an isolated incident. Yet, the bigger picture was far worse. Something sinister haunted that road. She advised caution. Drive by day. Stay public. Avoid the lonely dark. Gratitude mingled with unease. Just before she walked away, one final thought. Why had the truck done nothing? No robbery. No attack. Just a chase. Maybe it wasn't meant to happen that night. Maybe it had been observing. Watching. Waiting. The waitress didn't have an answer, just a chilling suggestion. Maybe next time would be different. She left him there, the words hanging in the air like smoke. The hours passed. More coffee. The sunrise brought normalcy, the hum of life pushing back the weight of the night. Back on the road, things looked different in daylight. Still, the eyes never left the mirrors for long. The ride home was uneventful, but something had shifted. The fear lingered. Curiosity became obsession. Reports were searched. Articles read. Always stopping short of making a police report. What would they say? What could they believe? Weeks blurred by. The fear dulled but never left. That highway remained untouched, avoided after dusk. Then the news came. A car abandoned on that same highway. The driver missing. Witnesses mentioned a truck. No one saw a driver. No one ever did. The screen flickered with updates, but all he could do was stare. The terror rushed back. Was that night an escape? Or merely a postponement? Every headlight at night now brought dread. Every large vehicle felt like a threat. What was once peaceful had turned to paranoia. The empty highways were no longer empty. And sometimes, what waits in the dark doesn't vanish just because you see it coming. The shovel hit something solid. The vibration ran up both arms, stopping the digging cold. Sweat dripped, hands muddy. This well was supposed to go down another 10 feet without hitting anything but dirt. A call went out to Jake, the son, to grab the flashlight. Something had been found. 6 months ago, the farm had been inherited from an uncle. A wreck of a place, but a chance at starting fresh after the divorce. Together, father and son had poured everything into it, mending fences, restoring the barn, and now, digging a well. The old one had dried up long ago. They needed water. The beam of the flashlight hit the point of contact, smooth metal gleamed under the dirt. Curious eyes widened. The digging resumed with renewed energy. It was a metal box, suitcase-sized, aged and worn. The excitement built. Time capsule. Treasure. Junk. Another hour passed before it was freed. The sun dipped low, casting the landscape in golden light as they lugged it to the barn. Under the white blaze of floodlights, they inspected it. No lock. No latch. Just corrosion and mystery. Barely visible were faded letters, illegible through rust. The decision was made, crowbar in hand. The seal gave after a fight. A musty scent poured out, old and damp. Inside, papers, photographs, and layers of waxy wrapping. The first image was of a smiling young woman from another era, 1960s, maybe. On the back, Sarah Milligan, 1964. A chill began to settle in. The name stirred something faint, a memory not yet surfaced. More photos followed, all of the same woman, around the farm. Letters, clippings, a small leather-bound journal. A newspaper clipping fluttered free. The headline stunned, "Local woman still missing after 3 months." It was Sarah. Gone since '64. No trace ever found. Her father had been suspected, but never charged. Jake's voice cut through the moment. Something was wrong. The truth became undeniable, they had found evidence of a decades-old mystery. A missing person, hidden just beneath the surface of their new life. This wasn't coincidence. It was history refusing to stay buried. The rest of the night unfolded in chaos. Deputies. Crime scene techs. Flashing lights and questions. The quiet life they'd started was shattered by what lay in that box. Separate interviews. Endless retellings. It was well after midnight before the dust settled. The box was gone now. Taken away in a plastic evidence bag, sealed, labeled, documented like something tame. But the house still breathed around it, the space where it had been, a hollow on the shelf, still watched us, like an eye half-lidded in sleep. We'd been told not to talk about it. To keep quiet, let the professionals handle it. As if there were anyone to talk to. We'd only just moved here. The neighbors waved from their porches but didn't linger. There was always a kind of silence in the fields, like they remembered things no one dared say. That night, I tucked Jake into bed. He was jittery, still charged with the strange electricity of the discovery. He asked if we'd found treasure, if it meant we were detectives now. I smiled, tried to, anyway, and told him we'd talk about it in the morning. But I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, staring through the window into the wide blackness of the fields. A half-drunk cup of coffee cooled in my hand. The wind brushed against the glass like fingertips. Sarah Milligan. The name rustled in my head like dry leaves. Familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. I knew that name. From somewhere far back, wrapped in something half-remembered. By morning I couldn't stand it. I drove into town like I was being pulled, like something had unhooked itself from the dark and was guiding me now. The library sat on the corner of Main Street like it had always been there. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of old paper and something deeper, dust, decay, the weight of waiting. I found the archives, loaded the microfiche like I knew how, and started to read. Sarah was 23. Engaged. Gone. One day she was planning a wedding. The next, a ghost. Her father had reported that she'd left the farm to run errands. She never returned. Her father. James Milligan. My uncle. The name hit me like cold water. That's why I knew her name. My mother had mentioned Sarah once, in the murky tones people use when speaking of the dead without proof. A cousin. A story that had trailed off in the telling. I left the library in a fog that didn't lift. My uncle had left me the farm. His handwriting still clung to the deed. Had I inherited something more than land? The thought curled in my chest like smoke. When I pulled into the driveway, a police cruiser was already there. Detective Reeves stood leaning against her car. She looked too calm. The kind of calm that comes before you hear something that can't be undone. "Mr. Collins," she said. "We need to talk." We sat at the same kitchen table where I'd stared out into the night. Where the coffee had gone cold and the silence had grown teeth. "We ran DNA on the contents of the box," she said, voice steady. "It matches Sarah Milligan. We're treating this as a homicide." I felt myself nodding, not really present. My voice was a rough whisper. "I didn't know. I swear. I never even met him, my uncle." She raised an eyebrow. "Your uncle." "James Milligan," I said. She leaned back, something flickering behind her eyes. "Surprise. Calculation. You're related to the Milligans." I told her everything I'd learned. About the name. The family tie. My mother's quiet stories. Her eyes narrowed like someone had turned a key inside her head. "This complicates things," she said finally. "We'll need to do a full forensic search of the property. I'm afraid you and your son will have to relocate, temporarily." "Of course. Whatever you need." That's what I said. I was still numb, floating. Jake stood in the doorway behind me, silent, watching. His eyes too old for his age. The farm became a crime scene. They came with yellow tape and camera flashes. Boots that trampled over old soil, stirring up whispers from beneath. Jake and I stayed at a motel with humming lights and floral curtains that curled at the edges like dried petals. Every night, we watched the news talk about us like a storybook. The box. The bones. The missing girl from decades ago. And the nephew who inherited it all. Jake didn't ask questions at first. Then one night, Curled up next to me on the stiff motel bed, he whispered, "Do you think Uncle James did it? Do you think he killed Sarah?" I pulled him close. His heartbeat thudded against mine. "I don't know, buddy," I said. "I really don't. They found no smoking gun. Just threads. A girl who wanted to leave. A father who didn't want her to. Arguments. Tension. Gaps. Holes. No answers. Only echoes. After 2 months, they let us go back. The farm was the same, and not. The floors creaked in a new register. The wind carried a different voice. I avoided the shelf where the box had rested, as though it might grow teeth. We stayed. Because we had to. But also because it felt like something was unfinished, waiting. Like Sarah hadn't been buried deeply enough. It was weeks later when I saw the blue sedan. Just a car. Ordinary. Nondescript. Parked across from us at a gas station somewhere outside Chicago. I only noticed it because of the way the sun hit the windows, blank, unreadable. We were on the road, me and Emily. Trying to find something normal. A trip to stitch things back together. Roadside diners, empty highways, hotel sheets that smelled like bleach and strangers. The next time I saw the car, it was 2 hours later. At a diner. Sitting in the lot. Unmoved. Watching. "Is it just me," I asked Emily, "or did we see that same car earlier?" She shrugged. Probably just a coincidence. But my palms didn't believe her. My hand stayed tight on the wheel, like something was waiting for me to let go. By the 5th time we saw it, I knew. Something had followed us out of the motel. Something with tinted windows and long memories. Something we thought we'd left behind. We couldn't go back. Mark knew too much, where we lived, where we worked, how we moved through the world. Every step we took was a breadcrumb he might follow. It was no longer a vacation. It had become an escape. And even now, as pale light crept through the thin motel curtains, it felt like we were already too late. "We're going to disappear," I said. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her hands in her lap like forgotten things. Her eyes were red, her voice raw. "What do you mean, disappear?" "I mean everything. Names, history, digital fingerprints. We're going to start over. Go where he'd never think to look." It sounded absurd, like a script from a bad thriller. But the logic made a twisted sort of sense in the half-light of dawn. She was quiet a long time. Then, a nod. Slow. Heavy. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it." So we began to plan, not a life, but an erasure. Scrubbing ourselves from the surface of the map like fading chalk. No more California. No more open highways and coastlines. Only burner phones, fake documents, cash in folded envelopes. Our road trip had become something else, a corridor away from memory, bordered by fear on one side and hope on the other. I don't know if we'll ever be free of Mark. I don't know if we'll stop checking mirrors, stop flinching at footsteps in hotel hallways, stop bracing for shadows that never quite appear. But we're still together. For now, that's enough. The road stretches ahead, hollow and endless. We drive. The last time I saw Eliza Thompson, she was laughing. It was the kind of laugh that filled the air like perfume, made brighter by the dying sun. Her long, dark hair caught in the golden wind, her head tilted back like she was made of joy. I didn't know then that the ocean would swallow her name. That by morning, she would be gone, utterly and without reason, leaving only an empty room and a silence that wouldn't stop ringing in my ears. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Michael Chen. I was a security officer aboard the Emerald Princess, a floating city dressed as a cruise ship, drifting through the Caribbean like a dream you wake up too early from. I'd been on the job for 3 years. I thought I understood what the sea could take. I didn't. It began like any other day. My shift started at 6 a.m. The ship still slept, its long steel corridors echoing only the sound of my footsteps. In the atrium, glass and marble glittered under artificial starlight. That's where I saw Eliza. Her shift had just ended. She stood at the reception desk, gathering her things, fighting off a yawn. "Morning, Michael," she said. "Nothing exciting planned," I replied. She smiled. "I'm watching the sunrise first. Want to join?" I hesitated. I shouldn't have gone. But I did. We stood on deck 16, the wind tugging at our sleeves. The sky was an open wound, bleeding pink and fire over the horizon. "I love this part," she said. "No matter how many cruises I work, it always feels brand new." I watched her. There was something fragile and eternal in her expression. We talked about nothing. Her life, mine. Plans. Ghosts. Then she sighed. "I should get some sleep." She thanked me for the company and walked away. That was the last time I saw her alive. The shift crawled by. Nothing unusual. No alarms. No panicked calls. Just the low hum of machinery and the occasional footstep behind me that always turned out to be nothing. It wasn't until the staff meeting that evening that something cracked. "Eliza's not here," Rita said. "Our supervisor." Her frown was a shadow beneath the flickering ceiling light. "She was supposed to start over an hour ago." I said I'd seen her that morning. Said she was going to sleep. "Check her cabin," Rita ordered. I went. Knocked. Called her name. Used my master key. Inside, it felt wrong. The bed was made. Too perfect. Her uniform hung neatly on a chair. Her phone sat beside the lamp, screen dark, untouched. The air felt hollow, like something had stepped out and left its skin behind. "She's not here," I radioed. "Initiate search protocol." We searched everything. Every stairwell, every shadow, every breath of steel and sea. Cameras, interviews, compartments. At 7:12 a.m., footage showed her entering her cabin. That was the last trace. No exit. No forced entry. No violence. She was just gone. Passengers noticed. Rumors bloomed like mold. Overboard. Suicide. Escape. Murder. Theories came and went like tides. None of them made sense. Eliza's room was a ghost box. Her life still folded into the drawers. Her passport untouched. Her things too orderly, too still. I thought, if she planned to leave, she didn't pack. I thought, if someone took her, they left no mark. I thought, if she vanished, then how? Days passed. Then weeks. Her family arrived. Their faces were maps of grief with no destination. I watched from a distance. I couldn't speak. What would I say? I stayed on the Emerald Princess. I told myself I had to. That leaving before she was found would be betrayal. But the sea offered no answers. Nights are the worst. I find myself back on deck 16. Watching the black waves. Listening for something that doesn't speak in words. The ocean holds its secrets. And I think, maybe Eliza became one of them. Weird things happen in quiet places. The first cut in the tent was too perfect. It wasn't the sloppy tear of weather or animal. It was surgical, long, deliberate, almost reverent. The nylon frayed like peeled skin. The light filtered through in narrow shafts, catching dust that hung in the air like something breathing. My name's Alex. I'd been hiking the Appalachian Trail with Jamie for a month. We were used to the wilderness. Used to the silence and the dark and the hunger. But nothing prepared us for that clearing. That absence. It started like any other day. Cool air, tight boots, 15 miles of green tunnel ahead. But that afternoon, the woods felt off. The birds were quiet. The shadows long. And when Jamie called to me, his voice too small in the vast stillness, I felt it too. A tree. Carved. A circle slashed by a jagged line. Fresh. Sap still bled like something wounded. Probably a prank, Jamie muttered. But the quiet deepened as we pressed on. No squirrels. No breeze. Just the sound of our breath and something else, something too slow and distant to name. Then we found the campsite. At first, it looked normal. Fire pit. Tent. Packs. But then we saw the way things were left. Unfinished. Like whoever had been there had meant to return, but never did. The tent door flapped open. The pot still held the crust of last night's meal. One sleeping bag half-sipped, the other flattened like someone had just risen from it. Then I saw the first slash. Then another. The tent wasn't torn. It was cut. Again and again. Sliced like fabric on an altar. I ran my hand along one. The edge curled slightly inward. It had been done with something wickedly sharp, and recently. Jamie called out into the trees. No one answered. I could feel the woods breathing around us. But then I shook my head, hard, snapping myself out of it. That thing, it wasn't just a trinket. Holding it felt like gripping a live wire made of ice and static. Every part of me screamed to drop it, to toss it into the desert and drive until I forgot it ever existed. And I almost did. I almost let it go. But something held me in place. I stood there for what felt like a long time, the desert around me stretched wide and silent, the stars sharp as broken glass above. The wind picked up, whispering through the mesquite-like voices just out of hearing. I turned, slowly, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of Mike, but he was gone. Just, gone. No footsteps in the gravel, no silhouette against the black horizon. It was as if the night had swallowed him whole. I looked back down at the thing in my hand. The symbols etched into its surface pulsed faintly, almost like they were breathing. Not glowing, not quite, but alive in a way stone shouldn't be. The longer I stared, the more I felt that wrongness pressing in. A weight behind my eyes. A pressure at the base of my skull. Finally, I forced myself to shove it into the glove box. Slammed it shut. Took a deep breath like I'd just surfaced from deep underwater. I climbed back into the truck, hands trembling as I started the engine. The rumble of the diesel brought some small comfort, familiar and grounding. I pulled back onto the highway, tires kicking up a storm of dust behind me, and drove fast. Faster than I should have. But I didn't care. The radio was still playing, but I turned it off. Couldn't stand the noise. The silence that followed was worse. Too heavy. Too aware. I flicked on the cabin lights, then flicked them off again. Something in me was starting to fray at the edges. I drove like that for hours. Desert blurring past. Horizon never getting closer. And then the dreams started. Not when I was asleep, but in the cracks between blinks. Micro-dreams, my mind slipping sideways for fractions of seconds. One moment I'd be watching the road, the next I'd be somewhere else. A hallway, endlessly narrow. A room with no ceiling. Forests that pulsed like breathing things. In one of them, I saw Mike. Or what was left of him. He was standing knee-deep in black sand, eyes hollow, mouth moving without sound. Behind him, the shadows moved, tall, thin, wrong. I snapped awake before I could see more, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The next time I stopped for gas, the attendant stared at me like I was something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. I caught my reflection in the window and barely recognized myself. Eyes sunken, skin pale and waxy. I looked like a man who hadn't slept in a year. "Rough night?" she asked. I didn't answer. Just paid, nodded, and left. I didn't want to risk sleeping in the cab. Not with it so close. So I kept moving. Somewhere outside of Oregon, the dreams got worse. Stronger. More vivid. I wasn't even asleep anymore when I started seeing them. I'd glance at the passenger seat and see something sitting there. Not Mike. Something else. Something taller. Skinnier. Smiling. Sometimes I'd hear whispering. Not in English. Not in any language I know. A scratchy, insect-like chittering that made my skin crawl and my teeth ache. And the artifact. The artifact kept humming. Even from inside the glove box. Even over the engine noise. I could feel it. Like a second heartbeat, thrumming in time with my own. Or maybe ahead of it. Maybe leading. I tried to throw it away. Pulled over at a rest stop, opened the glove box, grabbed it, and hurled it as far as I could into the night. I didn't watch where it landed. Didn't want to. I got back in the truck and peeled out fast. For a while, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I was free. But 5 miles later, I heard something click in the glove box. And when I opened it, it was back. Sitting there like it had never left. Like it was part of the truck now. Or part of me. That was the moment I stopped trying to fight it. Not because I gave up, but because I knew. I knew. This wasn't something you could just walk away from. It wasn't cursed, or haunted, or infected. It was. And once it had its hooks in you, there was no going back. I've tried every trick I know. Salt. Fire. Prayer. I even tried driving to a church and leaving it there. But the moment I stepped back outside, I felt that weight again. Looked in the glove box. Still there. I've seen other people since then. People at truck stops, diners, fueling stations. I've had to force myself not to talk to them, not to make eye contact. Because part of me is tempted. I could end this. I could hand it off. Tell someone a story, get them to take it. And for a few fleeting moments, I might be free. But I'd know. I'd know what I'd done. So I keep driving. Eyes raw. Mind fraying. And I don't stop anymore. Not for gas station drifters. Not for broken down cars. Not for kids with lost looks in their eyes and thumbs in the air. And if you're reading this, if somehow this gets out, listen to me. Listen close. If you ever find something in the middle of nowhere, something old, something carved, something that makes the world go quiet, leave it. Don't touch it. Don't take it. And for the love of everything that's still good in this world, don't let someone give it to you. Because once it knows your name, it never lets go. It took me a moment to register. The driver's door was ajar. Not wide open, just slightly, as if someone had stepped out and meant to return. A purse sat on the passenger seat, its contents undisturbed. Wallet, phone, a half-finished bottle of water. Nothing appeared stolen or rummaged through. I called out, flashlight cutting through the dry Nevada night. Hello. Highway patrol, anyone out here? Nothing. Just the wind stirring dust across the pavement and the distant hum of the desert night. Then I saw the footprints. They led away from the car, toward the empty field beyond the shoulder. Not toward a town, or a rest stop. Just out into nowhere. I followed, careful not to disturb them. Crisp impressions in the dry soil. Barefoot. No signs of a struggle. No indication of someone limping or running. And then they stopped. Right there. In the middle of the field. As if whoever had made them had been plucked clean out of reality. I stood still for a long moment, the beam of my flashlight dancing over the dust. The hair on my arms prickled. There's a kind of silence out here that feels wrong, too thick, too still, like even the wind is holding its breath. I radioed it in. Told dispatch the vehicle was empty, that I was continuing to search. I didn't mention the footprints. I didn't know how to explain them, and I didn't want to hear the static crackled laugh of some bored dispatcher brushing me off. I made a slow circuit of the area. No tire tracks besides mine. No other footprints. No sign of life at all. And that's when I saw the light. Faint. Flickering. Off in the distance. Too steady to be a star, too low to be a plane. I turned off my flashlight, squinting against the dark, and it was still there. Hovering. Pulsing. I should have called it in. Waited for backup. Done literally anything except what I did next. I walked toward it. I know how it sounds. I do. But there's something about the desert at night, something ancient and quiet and persuasive. You start to forget yourself. The boundaries between what's rational and what's real get slippery. The light didn't grow larger as I approached. If anything, it seemed to stay the same size, like distance didn't apply to it. And then, all at once, it blinked out. Gone. Just, gone. I stopped walking. Looked around. I was farther from the road than I'd realized. The silence was absolute. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Close. Shallow. Ragged. I spun, hand on my weapon, shouting out, "This is Trooper Jennings. Identify yourself." No response. Just the breathing. Then a low, shuffling noise, like dry feet dragging over sand. And then something spoke. Only it didn't use words. It was inside my head. A whisper without sound. A presence behind my eyes. Images flashing across my mind like strobe lights, fields of black glass, a sky pulsing red, a face with no features screaming silently from behind a veil of static. I fell to my knees. I don't remember dropping my flashlight, but suddenly I was in the dark. And just like that, it was over. Silence again. The breathing was gone. The presence was gone. And I was alone. I stumbled back to the road. Found my patrol car right where I'd left it, headlights still on, radio crackling softly with the dispatcher's voice. I didn't tell her what happened. I said the car was abandoned, no sign of the driver, and called in for a tow. Left it at that. In the official report, I chalked it up as person missing under unexplained circumstances. The file joined a handful of others just like it, strange disappearances in this stretch of desert, always under a moonless sky, always without a trace. But I knew better. I know better. That wasn't a disappearance. It was a removal. Who, or what, did it, I still don't know. But since that night, I haven't been the same. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that light again. Pulsing. Patient. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm out on patrol, I hear breathing, soft, close, just behind me in the car. I keep driving. I don't stop. Because whatever's out there in the Nevada dark, it's still watching. Still waiting. And I get the feeling that one day, it's going to want me to come back. A low, guttural sound that froze us in place. Not an animal call. Not anything human. It resonated through the trees, vibrating in our chests like the growl of something massive and ancient. We stood there, huddled together, too terrified to move, until Lily started crying, her soft sobs seeming unbearably loud in the silence that followed. "We have to move," I whispered, grabbing Sarah's hand. "Now." We pushed forward, ignoring the pain in our legs, the burning in our lungs. The forest had changed. The trail was harder to follow, as if the terrain itself was shifting, reshaping to confuse us. Branches that hadn't been there before reached out like skeletal hands, snagging our clothes. The air was colder too, unnaturally so, each breath like ice in our lungs despite the summer heat. Behind us, the forest came alive with sound, cracking branches, something moving at incredible speed, weaving through the trees with terrifying ease. Not crashing. Hunting. Then Max tripped. He fell hard, scraping his knees on the gravel path. I scooped him up, heart pounding, as Sarah pulled Lily along, tears streaming down her cheeks. That's when we saw the lights. Faint at first, just a dull orange glow flickering through the trees like a dying campfire. But as we got closer, it took shape, a building. The ranger station. Relief crashed over me like a wave. We sprinted the final stretch, the ground seeming to fight us every step of the way. I reached the door and pounded on it. Help. Please, help us. No answer. I tried the handle, it turned. The door creaked open into a dark interior that smelled of mildew and dust. I paused for a heartbeat, that primal instinct in my brain screaming that something wasn't right. But I shoved it down and led my family inside, locking the door behind us. The ranger station was abandoned. Paperwork scattered across the desk. A tipped-over chair. A mug of coffee long gone cold, now crusted with mold. The radios were dead. Phones, nothing but static. But the strangest part? There were no signs of departure. No keys missing. No personal belongings gone. It was as if whoever had been there had just stopped existing. We huddled in a corner, listening to the forest. Whatever had been chasing us wasn't trying to get in. Not yet. It circled instead. We could hear it, slow, deliberate footsteps pacing the building. Once, we saw a massive shadow pass by the window. Just a glimpse. But enough to confirm what we already feared. It wasn't human. Night stretched on endlessly. We took turns keeping watch. Every few minutes, the floorboards creaked, the walls groaned, and that strange, rhythmic growl echoed through the trees. It was waiting us out. Like a predator sure of its kill. At dawn, the noise stopped. The forest outside was silent again. Sarah wanted to leave immediately, but something in me, some deeply buried instinct, said wait. So we stayed, just a little longer. That's when the door handle turned. Slow. Deliberate. Metal scraping against metal. We froze. The lock held. For now. But that moment snapped something in me. I realized then we weren't dealing with a bear or mountain lion or even some twisted human. This was something older. Something primal. And it wanted us to be afraid. We couldn't give it that. I took the flare gun from the emergency kit and loaded around. Gave Max a flashlight and Sarah a fire axe we found in the supply closet. Then, I opened the door. The forest was empty. No tracks. No sound. Just a heavy, unnatural stillness. We ran. I don't remember much of that sprint back down the mountain, only fragments, Sarah shouting, the kids crying, my legs burning. But eventually, we burst out onto the road where a park ranger's truck was idling, its driver just stepping out, his eyes wide at the sight of us. They never found anything. No tracks. No sign of the thing. Not even that massive footprint, which had vanished with the night. They said it was a bear attack. Maybe a rogue grizzly, even though no bears had been sighted in that area for decades. We nodded, signed the reports. But we knew the truth. And now, every night, I check the doors. I listen to the wind in the trees. Because I don't think it was tied to Blue Pine Campground. I think it followed us home. And somewhere in the deep, dark places of the world, it's still watching. Still waiting. Still hungry. A low, Rumbling growls seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Lily's scream pierced the night, and Max's frightened tears spilled down his cheeks. "Run!" I yelled, scooping Lily into my arms as Sarah grabbed Max's trembling hand. Panic clawed at our chests as we tore down the narrow trail, branches slashing across our faces, roots twisting underfoot, threatening to trip us with every desperate step. That terrible growl kept rising, louder, closer, a haunting sound that echoed through the trees. I dared a glance behind me, and instantly wished I hadn't. Something was moving in the shadows between the trunks, massive, dark, impossible to see clearly. Just then, glowing eyes flickered in the gloom, and a flash of sharp teeth caught the moonlight. Frozen for a split second, I snapped my gaze forward and ran harder than I ever had before. We stumbled into a small clearing, gasping for breath, and there, like a fragile promise of safety, stood a cabin. Not the ranger station we'd been aiming for, but in that desperate moment, it was salvation. Without hesitation, we sprinted toward the door, hands shaking as I gripped the handle. It turned. We tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind us. For a long, breathless moment, we stood frozen, listening. Outside, something large circled the cabin. Scratches scraped along the walls like nails on wood. A low, frustrated growl vibrated through the night air. "What is it, Daddy?" Lily whimpered, burying her face against my shoulder. "I don't know, sweetheart," I murmured, running my fingers through her hair. "But we're safe in here. It can't get us." Our eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light. The cabin was small, just one room, with a cold fireplace, a few worn pieces of rustic furniture, and shelves lined with dusty canned goods, like some forgotten emergency shelter or hunting cabin. Sarah found lanterns and lit them, casting a flickering, warm glow. The kids huddled together on a threadbare couch as she pulled me aside. "Alex, what are we going to do?" she whispered, voice trembling. "What if it doesn't leave?" I swallowed hard, trying to hold on to reason. "We have shelter, and food. We just wait. Someone will come looking for us." But as the night stretched on, the creature outside showed no sign of giving up. We could hear it prowling, testing the walls and door, its growls shaking the windows. Eventually, the kids slipped into uneasy sleep, drained by the day's terror. Sarah and I took turns watching, eyes glued to the windows, scanning the blackness. And then, in the darkest hours, the moon peeked from behind the clouds, casting pale light across the clearing. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was a creature that should not exist. Towering, at least 8 feet tall, its body was a twisted patchwork of beasts. Thick fur covered most of it, but patches of scales glistened in the moonlight, along with strange feathers that rustled softly. Its face was a nightmare blend, part bear, part something almost human. Its eyes glowed an unnatural yellow. Frozen in horror, I met its gaze. Then, impossibly, it smiled. Rows of razor-sharp teeth gleamed in the moonlight. I stumbled back, heart pounding as if it might burst from my chest. This couldn't be real. Creatures like that didn't exist. They couldn't. But the growl rumbling through the night was as real as the cold sweat on my skin. Days blurred. The sun rose and set as that terrible presence stayed outside, waiting. We rationed the canned food, keeping a fragile hope alive. The kids tried to turn the nightmare into a game, but I saw the fear in Sarah's eyes, the way it wore on her. On what I think was the 5th day, we woke to silence. No growls. No scratching. I peered cautiously out the window. The clearing was empty. We waited another day, then stepped outside. The forest looked normal again, birds singing, small animals scurrying. But the claw marks on the cabin walls, the massive footprints in the mud, were proof enough. We made our way back to the campsite. Instead of destruction, we found a search party. Our car had been fixed, someone had noticed it abandoned and called it in. We told them a safe version of events. Lost. Found shelter. Waited out a storm. Who would believe the truth? As we drove home, the kids chattered about their adventure, but I couldn't shake it. We'd glimpsed something we shouldn't have. A creature lurking just beyond the shadows of the world. Waiting. Sometimes, on dark nights when the wind howls and the doors are locked tight, I wonder. Is it still out there, roaming the wilderness? Waiting for the next family to wander too close. The wilderness keeps its secrets. And sometimes, those secrets have teeth and claws. I don't know what happened on the paradise of the seas. I don't know where everyone went or why I was left behind, or what those lights in the sky were. But I do know this, our understanding of reality, of time and space, is far more limited than we think. There are things out there, forces at work that we can't begin to comprehend. Sometimes, if we're very unlucky, we catch a glimpse of them, a peek behind the curtain of reality into the vast, terrifying unknown that lies beyond. I got that glimpse, and it changed me forever. So, the next time you're on a cruise or any ship for that matter, and you feel a sudden chill or notice the quality of light change ever so slightly, or find yourself alone in a place that should be crowded, remember my story and hope with every fiber of your being that you don't slip through the cracks of time like I did. Because trust me, once you've experienced that kind of impossible solitude, you're never quite the same again. The scratching started on the first night, a faint, persistent sound that could have been tree branches against the cabin's wooden walls, if not for the absolute stillness of the air outside. I lay awake, Emily's steady breathing beside me, and listened as the noise grew louder, more deliberate. It wasn't until I heard a distinct tapping on the bedroom window that I realized, with a chill that ran deep into my bones, that whatever was out there wasn't a tree, and it wanted in. My name is Daniel, and what was supposed to be a romantic getaway with my girlfriend turned into a waking nightmare that I'm still trying to understand. We'd been dating for a year, and with both of us drowning in work stress, a week in a secluded cabin seemed like the perfect escape. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just us and the great outdoors. If only we'd known what was waiting for us in those woods. We arrived at the cabin late Friday afternoon. It was exactly as advertised, a cozy two-bedroom log structure nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the dirt road leading to the property had been rough enough to make us question our decision more than once. But as we stepped out of the car, the fresh mountain air and the absolute quiet washed away our doubts. This was exactly what we needed. The cabin's owner, a gruff older man named Bill, met us with the keys. As he gave us a quick tour, I couldn't help but notice how his eyes darted nervously around, never quite settling on one spot. Now, couple things to remember, he said as we stood on the porch. Don't go wandering in the woods after dark. Lots of wildlife out there, and it's easy to get turned around. And if you hear any strange noises at night, just ignore them, probably just raccoons or something. I nodded, not thinking much of it at the time. Every cabin owner had their quirks and warnings. Oh, and one more thing, Bill added, his hand on the door. Whatever you do, don't open the doors or windows at night, no matter what you hear. Got it? Before we could ask what he meant, he was gone, his truck kicking up dust as he sped down the dirt road. Emily and I exchanged glances. Well, that was weird, she said with a nervous laugh. I shrugged it off. Probably just trying to scare the city folk. Come on, let's unpack. The rest of the day was perfect. We hiked a nearby trail, cooked dinner on the old wood stove, and spent the evening cuddled up on the porch swing watching the stars come out in a sky unspoiled by light pollution. It wasn't until we were getting ready for bed that I noticed the scratches. They were on the inside of the doors and around the windows, long, deep gouges in the wood that looked like they'd been made by something with very sharp claws. Come look at this, I called out. She came over, frowning as she ran her fingers over the marks. Weird. You think a bear tried to get in or something? Maybe, I said, though something about the scratches made my skin crawl. They seemed too deliberate, too purposeful. We went to bed joking about ghost bears to lighten the mood, but as the night wore on and the scratching started, those jokes didn't seem funny anymore. I lay there, every muscle tense, listening to the sound move around the cabin. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, pause. Then the tapping on the window, like something was testing the glass. Emily stirred beside me. "Dan, do you hear that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. We clung to each other, barely breathing, as the tapping moved from window to window. Finally, after what felt like hours, it stopped. We eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. As dawn began to break the next morning, we tried to rationalize what had happened. Raccoons, we decided. Or maybe a particularly persistent owl. We spent the day hiking and swimming in a nearby lake, the bright sunshine making the terrors of the night seem distant and silly. But as evening fell and we returned to the cabin, that sense of unease crept back. We double-checked all the locks, drew the curtains tight, and tried to distract ourselves with board games and wine. The scratching started earlier that night, more insistent than before. This time it was accompanied by something else, a low guttural sound that was almost, but not quite, a voice. "Daniel," Emily whispered, her face pale in the lamplight. "That's not an animal." I wanted to reassure her, to say it was just the wind or our imaginations playing tricks on us. But as the not-quite voice grew louder, forming sounds that were almost words, I couldn't lie to her or myself. We huddled together on the bed, watching the shadows under the door, listening to whatever was out there circling the cabin again and again. At one point, something heavy threw itself against the front door, making the whole cabin shudder. I thought about making a run for the car, but the keys were in the living room, and the idea of opening any door seemed impossible. So we waited, clinging to each other as the night stretched on endlessly. Just before dawn, in that darkest hour when hope seems furthest away, we heard a new sound, footsteps on the porch, then a knock at the door, a human knock. "Hello? Anyone in there?" A man's voice. Gruff but blessedly normal. We approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, I could see Bill, the cabin owner, standing on the porch with a flashlight. I opened the door, relief flooding through me. "Bill. Thank God. There's something out here, something." He cut me off, pushing past us into the cabin. "I know. That's why I'm here. You two okay?" We nodded, still shaken. Bill did a quick circuit of the cabin, checking the windows and doors. When he was satisfied, he turned to us with a grim expression. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have told you the whole truth when you got here, but I was afraid you'd leave, and I need the money. If I'm being honest," he told us, "this land, it's not right. Never has been. As long as I can remember, things live in these woods. Things that ain't natural. Most of the time, they keep to themselves, but sometimes, especially when there's new blood around, they get curious." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of things?" He shook his head. "I don't rightly know. Never seen M clearly, but I've heard M, felt M watching. They're smart, whatever they are. Smart and hungry." "Why don't you leave?" Emily asked. "Can't," Bill said simply. "This land's been in my family for generations. And besides," he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I don't think they'd let me." We spent the rest of that night huddled in the living room with Bill, listening to his stories of the things that lived in the woods. Tales passed down through his family of people who'd vanished over the years, of nights when the barriers between our world and something else seemed as thin as the sun. As the sun rose, casting long shadows through the trees, Bill stood up. "They'll be gone now," he said. "They can't stand the daylight. You two should pack up and go. I'll refund your money." We didn't argue. Within an hour, we were in our car speeding down the mountain road, the cabin receding in our rearview mirror. We never talked much about what happened that weekend. How could we explain it to anyone else? Even between ourselves, we found it easier to let the memory fade, to focus on our normal, safe lives in the city. But sometimes, on dark nights when the wind blows just right, I find myself listening for that scratching sound. And in my dreams, I still hear that almost voice calling from just beyond the walls, trying to form words. I hope I never understand. I don't know what lives in those woods. I don't know why it was so interested in us, or what it might have done if it had gotten inside. But I do know this: there are places in this world where the veil between realities is thin, where things we can't comprehend lurk just out of sight. If you ever find yourself in a secluded cabin had actually happened, at least nothing they were willing to admit. The official report concluded it was likely an elaborate hoax or some kind of natural phenomenon that people misinterpreted, something explainable by science or pranksters. But I knew better. I felt the truth deep inside me, in a way no explanation could shake. There was something there, something powerful and terrifying that no amount of denial could erase. Dr. Fredman left soon after the investigations wrapped up. Before he left, he came by the house late one evening, his face drawn and pale, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and worry. He handed me a small device, a handheld electromagnetic field detector, something experimental from his university lab. "Keep this close," he said quietly. "If anything else happens, this will pick it up. It's not perfect, but it might give us a clue if whatever this is comes back." The weeks that followed felt like the calm after a storm. The strange equipment malfunctions stopped, my animals settled back into their routines, and the heavy silence lifted from the fields. Even my dreams quieted down. But despite all that, the feeling remained, an uneasy presence that never quite left me alone. Whenever the wind blew just right through the wheat, I could swear I heard whispers, like voices barely carried on the breeze, just on the edge of hearing. They sounded like secrets the field was trying to tell me. One night, months later, I was sitting on the porch staring out over the farm when the device Dr. Fredman gave me suddenly beeped, slow, rhythmic pulses breaking the silence like a heartbeat. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the field, every step heavy with unease. The wheat stalk swayed gently in the moonlight, casting long, shifting shadows that played tricks on my eyes. The beeping grew louder and faster, pulsing in time with the whispering wind. At the center of the crop circle, the wheat bowed deeply as if the whole field was paying homage to something invisible. I was frozen, heart hammering, when suddenly a voice drifted through the night air, not in my head this time, but clear, crisp, as if whispered right beside me. "Jack, come home." I staggered back, the device falling from my hand with a soft thud against the dry earth. The whispers multiplied, swirling around me like a storm in my mind, pushing and pulling at my senses. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something darker, more insistent, rooted me to the spot. I turned and ran without looking back, the sound of rustling wheat chasing me until I slammed the door behind me, panting and shaking. That was the last time I ever went near the crop circle. Sometimes, late at night when the wind is still and the world is quiet, I sit on my porch and listen. The wheat sways softly under the moonlight, and I swear I can still hear those faint whispers, just barely audible, calling from the depths of the field. Sometimes, I wonder what waits beneath those bent stalks, some presence older than the land itself, watching, waiting for someone to listen. I wonder how many others have heard that call and walked into the wheat, never to come back. So if you're ever driving late through the countryside, and you see a field with strange, perfect patterns carved into the crops, don't stop. Don't follow the whispers or the lights that hover above. Don't try to find out what's waiting for you in the center. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. And some calls are better left unanswered. Mesh of my tent, blurry but unmistakable. The figure was there, standing just outside, watching me. I didn't know how long it had been there, hours. Minutes. It didn't move or make a sound, just stared with those impossible, unblinking eyes. My breath caught, heart pounding as I realized I was not alone, not truly safe even in my tent. I packed up everything that morning, every muscle tight with fear and adrenaline. The forest that had once seemed so alive and welcoming now felt hostile, like it was watching me back, waiting. I kept my camera close as I made my way out, constantly glancing over my shoulder. The shadows between the trees seemed to shift unnaturally, and I swear I caught glimpses of movement just beyond the edge of my vision, figures, tall and thin, always just out of clear sight, vanishing whenever I tried to focus. Once I reached the safety of my car, I locked the doors and sat inside, heart hammering as the daylight filtered through the windows. I wanted to scream, to call someone, but I felt foolish. Who would believe me? A photographer chased out of the forest by something that looked like it belonged in nightmares? Still, the raw fear coursing through me was undeniable, and I knew I had to get as far away as possible. Back in town, I pored over the photos, the sequence undeniable. Whatever was in those woods was real, and it was watching me. I searched for any local legends, obscure articles, anything about strange sightings in the Olympic National Forest. There were whispers, old Native American stories about spirits and creatures that lurk in the shadows of the trees, guardians or monsters depending on the storyteller. I wanted to dismiss it all as folklore, but the evidence was staring back at me. I had found something ancient, something that had been waiting silently beneath the canopy, unseen for centuries. I've barely touched my camera since that trip. The images haunt me, a reminder that the natural world still holds secrets we're not meant to uncover. Sometimes I wonder if it was curiosity that drew the creature closer, or if it was warning me to stay away. Either way, I've learned a harsh lesson: some places are better left unexplored, some things better left unseen, and some stories better left untold. If you ever find yourself deep in the woods where the trees grow impossibly tall and the shadows stretch too long, don't peer too closely. Don't try to capture every moment with your lens or your phone. Because sometimes, the things watching you don't want to be seen. And if you hear a soft rustle just beyond the edge of your campfire's light, resist the urge to turn around. Just keep moving forward, and don't look back. Window, and in each one that figure was there, getting closer and closer. I should have left then, packed up and hiked out, assignment be damned, but some combination of curiosity, stubbornness, and plain old stupidity made me stay. I convinced myself that if I could just get clearer photos, just understand what this thing was, it would all make sense. So I stayed, and each night the creature came closer. I set up more camera traps around my campsite, capturing image after image of the being as it circled my tent. I barely slept, spending my nights huddled in my sleeping bag, clutching my hunting knife, and jumping at every sound. During the day, I'd venture out following trails of broken branches and those strange footprints. I found places where the undergrowth had been crushed, as if something large had been lying down. Once, I found a tuft of hair caught on a branch, coarse and gray, like no animal fur I'd ever seen. As the days passed, I began to feel like I was losing my mind. The forest, once beautiful and inviting, now seemed menacing. The trees loomed over me, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in broad daylight. And still, I stayed. The need to understand, to document what I was seeing, had become an obsession. It all came to a head on what should have been my last night in the forest. I was planning to hike out in the morning, my assignment completed, and my sanity hanging by a thread. I'd set up my cameras for one final night of observation, hoping against hope for that one clear shot that would prove I wasn't crazy. I must have dozed off despite my fear because I woke suddenly in the pitch black of my tent. Something had changed, the ever-present sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of insects, had gone silent. And there was something outside my tent. I could hear it moving softly but unmistakably, circling, sniffing. I lay there paralyzed with terror as it completed its circuit. Then, to my horror, I saw the zipper of my tent begin to move, slowly inch by agonizing inch. The opening of my tent widened. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my body wouldn't respond. I could only watch, eyes wide in the darkness, as a long pale hand with too many joints slipped through the opening. The hand paused, as if sensing my fear, then deliberately reached toward my camera, which lay next to my sleeping bag. In that moment, survival instinct finally overcame my paralysis. I lunged for the camera, snatching it away from that terrible hand. In the same motion, I kicked out at the tent wall, tearing through the fabric and tumbling out into the night. I ran blindly, desperately clutching the camera to my chest. I crashed through underbrush, stumbled over roots, branches whipping at my face. Behind me, I could hear it pursuing, not running but moving with terrible swiftness, flowing through the forest like smoke. I don't know how long I ran or how far. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but terror drove me on. Finally, mercifully, I saw lights ahead, the ranger station at the trailhead, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness. I burst out of the tree lean, gasping and sobbing. The startled ranger on duty took one look at my wild eyes and torn clothing and ushered me inside, locking the door behind us. The rest of that night is a blur. I remember telling my story, the ranger's skeptical looks turning to concern as he saw the raw fear in my eyes. I remember the police arriving, taking my statement, and I remember the moment when they asked to see my camera. With shaking hands, I turned it on and began to scroll through the images, but where there should have been dozens of photos of that otherworldly being, there was nothing. Just trees, shadows, and normal forest scenes. Even the photos from that final night, the ones I was sure I'd taken of the hand reaching into my tent, were gone. In the harsh fluorescent light of the ranger station, surrounded by the trappings of civilization, my entire experience began to seem like a bad dream. Had I imagined it all? Had 2 weeks of solitude in the deep woods driven me to some kind of breakdown? But then I saw it. In the very last photo on the camera, barely visible in the background was a figure, tall and thin, half hidden behind a tree. And though the image was blurry, I could swear it was smiling. I've never gone back to those woods. I've never told the full story to anyone but you. My editor got a watered-down version about being spooked by wildlife, and the photos I submitted were carefully curated to show nothing but the natural beauty of the forest. But sometimes, on dark nights when the wind whispers through the trees outside my window, I find myself thinking about what's out there in the deep woods, about the things that lurk just beyond the reach of our cameras and our understanding. And I wonder, with a chill that goes bone deep, if it's still out there watching, waiting for the next unsuspecting photographer to venture into its domain. So if you're ever in the wilderness, setting up your camera for that perfect shot of untouched nature, pay attention to the shadows between the trees. And if you see something moving there, something that doesn't quite fit, don't try to photograph it. Just run. Run, and don't look back. Because some things in this world are not meant to be captured on film. And once they notice you noticing them, they never forget. They never stop watching. And sooner or later, they come for you. The first time I saw her, I thought I was looking in a mirror. Same shoulder-length brown hair, same green eyes, even the same tiny scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood accident. But this was no reflection. It was a living, breathing woman who could have been my twin. Our eyes met across the crowded dining room, and I felt a chill run down my spine as she smiled and waved. I knew, with sickening certainty, that my relaxing Caribbean cruise had just taken a turn into uncharted waters. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until that moment, I'd been enjoying a much-needed vacation aboard the Majestic Dream, a luxury cruise liner making its way through the turquoise waters of the Caribbean. I'm a 32-year-old software engineer from Seattle, and this was my first real vacation in years. I'd been looking forward to 10 days of sun, relaxation, and maybe a little romance if I was lucky. The first few days had been everything I'd hoped for. I'd lounged by the pool, indulged in far too many fruity cocktails, and even struck up a flirtation with a handsome guy named Mike, who was traveling with a group of friends. It was on the fourth night, at the captain's dinner, that everything changed. I dressed up for the occasion, wearing a new blue dress I'd bought specifically for the cruise. As I made my way into the grand dining room, I caught sight of myself in one of the large decorative mirrors and paused to adjust my hair. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was just my reflection from a different angle. But as I turned to look directly at her, I realized with a jolt that she was a separate person, a person who looked exactly like me, down to the smallest detail. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the bustling dining room seemed to fade away. She smiled and waved as if we were old friends. I felt rooted to the spot, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate prank or a very vivid hallucination. A waiter bumped into me, breaking the spell. By the time I looked back, she was gone, lost in the sea of passengers making their way to their tables. Throughout dinner, I couldn't focus on the conversation at my table. My eyes kept scanning the room, looking for my doppelganger. I saw her once, sitting at a table across the room, but when I blinked, she was gone again. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mike's voice brought me back to the present. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh. "Sorry, just a bit tired, I guess. Must be all that sun." But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. Who was she? And why did she look exactly like me? The next morning, I was determined to find her and get some answers. I spent hours wandering the ship, checking every restaurant, lounge, and deck, but there was no sign of her. It wasn't until late afternoon that I saw her again. I was heading back to my cabin to get ready for dinner when I caught a glimpse of her turning a corner at the end of the hallway. I broke into a run, but when I rounded the corner, the corridor was empty. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, my face, smiling at me across the dining room. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to take a walk to clear my head. The ship was eerily quiet as I made my way through the deserted corridors. I found myself on one of the upper decks, leaning against the railing and staring out at the moonlit ocean. That's when I heard it, footsteps behind me. Soft but distinct. I turned, half expecting to see my double. Instead, it was Mike, looking surprised to see me. Sarah could become. For a moment, I was tempted. The promise of adventure, of the unknown, pulled at me. But then I thought of my life back home, of my friends and family, of Mike probably worried sick about where I'd disappeared to. I shook my head. No. This is my reality. My life. And I choose it. Her face twisted in anger, becoming less and less human by the second. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Before I could react, she lunged at me. I closed my eyes, bracing for impact, but it never came. Instead, I felt a rush of wind, a sensation of falling, and then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my cabin. Sunlight streamed through the porthole, and the sounds of passengers enjoying the morning filtered in from the hallway. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. But then I noticed something on my bedside table, a small silver pendant shaped like a key. Something I'd never seen before, but that looked strangely familiar. I picked it up. As I did, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. For just a second, I could have sworn my reflection smiled at me, with a mouth that was a little too wide. The rest of the cruise passed uneventfully. I never saw my doppelganger again. Eventually, I managed to convince myself that stress and too much sun had played tricks on my mind. Mike and I grew closer, and by the time we docked, we were making plans to see each other back in the real world. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself looking at that silver key and wondering about roads not taken, about other versions of myself and other realities. And I can't help but think that somewhere out there, on a ship sailing through the spaces between worlds, another Sarah made a very different choice. So if you ever find yourself on a cruise and catch a glimpse of someone who looks just like you, remember my story. Think very carefully about the choices you make. Because sometimes, our doubles are more than just reflections, they're glimpses of who we might become. For better or for worse. The words were whispered with such urgency, such raw fear, that I felt my blood turn to ice. Whatever you do, don't be here at midnight. The weathered trucker who'd spoken them was already walking away, leaving me frozen in my seat, a half-eaten burger growing cold on the plate in front of me. I glanced at my watch. 11:37 p.m. As I looked around the diner, taking in the tense faces and furtive glances of the other patrons, I realized with growing dread that I'd stumbled into something far more sinister than a late-night pit stop. My name's Jack, and until that moment, I'd been on a routine cross-country drive from New York to Los Angeles. I'm a freelance photographer, and I'd taken on a last-minute gig requiring me to transport some sensitive equipment that couldn't be trusted to shipping companies. The pay was good, and I figured the road trip would give me a chance to capture some interesting shots along the way. I'd been driving for nearly 18 hours straight, fueled by gas station coffee and the kind of determination that only comes from a looming deadline. When I saw the neon sign for Mel's Diner glowing like a beacon in the dark Nevada desert, I decided to pull over. My stomach was growling, and I figured a hot meal and a real cup of coffee would do me good. The diner looked like something straight out of a 1950s postcard, all chrome and red vinyl booths, with a jukebox in the corner playing old rock and roll tunes. But as soon as I walked in, I sensed something was off. The place was surprisingly busy for the middle of the night, but the atmosphere was tense, almost electric. I slid into an empty booth and ordered a cheeseburger and coffee from a waitress whose smile seemed a little too forced. As I waited for my food, I couldn't help but notice how everyone in the diner seemed on edge. Conversations were hushed, and people kept glancing at the large clock above the counter. When my food arrived, I tried to strike up a conversation. "Busy night, huh?" She nodded, eyes darting to the clock. "Yeah. It usually is around this time." "Oh. You get a lot of late-night traffic?" She hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Look, honey, you seem nice, so let me give you some advice: eat quick and get back on the road. You don't want to be here too long." Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone, hurrying off to another table. I sat there, burger halfway to my mouth, thoroughly confused. That's when the trucker at the counter turned to me and whispered those chilling words again. "Whatever you do, don't be here at midnight." Other patrons were starting to leave. They moved with an urgency that seemed at odds with the late hour, practically running to their vehicles. I flagged down my waitress again. "What's going on? Why is everyone leaving?" She glanced nervously at the clock, 11:45 p.m. now, and sighed. "I shouldn't tell you this, but things happen here at midnight. Bad things. Nobody knows why, but it's been going on for years. Some say this place sits on some kind of convergence, a weak spot between worlds. All I know is, you don't want to be here when the clock strikes 12. I laughed, though it sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Come on, you can't be serious. What is this place, haunted or something?" Her expression remained deadly serious. "Worse. Now please, for your own sake, finish up and go." I wanted to believe it was all an elaborate joke, some weird local custom to scare tourists. But the fear in her eyes, the palpable tension in the air, it felt too real to dismiss. I gulped down my coffee and threw some bills on the table, deciding that whatever was going on, I didn't want to stick around to find out. But as I stood up to leave, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. The door to the diner was gone. Where the entrance had been was now just a solid wall covered in the same tacky wallpaper as the rest of the place. I blinked hard, convinced I must be more tired than I thought. But when I opened my eyes, the wall was still there. "It's starting," someone whispered. I turned to see the other remaining patrons, about a dozen in total, huddled together in the center of the diner. The waitress was among them, her earlier composure crumbling as she clutched a coffee pot like a weapon. "What's starting? What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, panic rising in my throat. An old man with a face like weathered leather spoke up. "It's midnight, son. Or it will be in about," he checked his wife's watch, 2 minutes. "That's when they come." "Who comes? What are you talking about?" Before anyone could answer, the lights began to flicker. The jukebox, which had been quietly playing Great Balls of Fire, suddenly switched to a slow, discordant melody I didn't recognize. The temperature in the diner dropped several degrees in a matter of seconds. "Circle up," the old man shouted. "Remember, don't look directly at them, and whatever you do, don't let them touch you." The group formed a tight circle facing outward. Without thinking, I joined them, my back pressing against strangers. We huddled together. The waitress pressed something into my hand. "Salt and iron," she muttered. "Only things that slow them down." I wanted to laugh, to tell them all this was insane. But the words died in my throat as I saw something moving outside the windows, shapes darker than the night itself, flowing like smoke but with a terrible purpose to their movement. They pressed against the glass, which began to frost over despite the desert heat. Then, as the clock struck midnight, the real horror began. The shapes outside seemed to coalesce, forming vaguely humanoid figures that were somehow more terrifying for their almost recognizable form. They oozed through the cracks around the windows, seeping into the diner like noxious gas. Someone in our group whimpered. I felt a hand grasp mine and squeeze tight. The old man's voice rose in a chant, words in a language I didn't understand. Others joined in, voices shaking but growing stronger as they repeated the phrases. The shadow figures circled us, their movements jerky and unnatural. I caught glimpses of limbs that were too long, of faces that shifted and changed like smoke. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and something rotten. One of the creatures reached out towards our group. Without thinking, I flung the contents of my salt shaker at it. The thing recoiled with a hiss like radio static, its form dissipating for a moment before reforming. Time seemed to stretch and distort. I couldn't tell if we'd been surrounded for minutes or hours. My arm ached from holding it out, salt shaker at the ready. My throat was raw from chanting words I didn't understand. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, when the press of bodies and the suffocating presence of the shadow creatures became too much, something changed. The old man's chant